House of a Dine? Don't enter my home. The iron gates stood ajar, their rusted hinges groaning in the wind like tortured souls. Marcus hesitated at the entrance, his phone's GPS insisting this was the address from the cryptic dinner invitation. The Victorian mansion loomed before him, its Gothic spires piercing the storm-darkened sky like accusing fingers. House of a Dine. He read aloud from the weathered sign, squinting through the rain. The peculiar wording had intrigued him when he'd received the elegant invitation 3 days prior. No return address, just his name written in flowing script and an address that led him here, to this forsaken estate on the outskirts of town. Lightning illuminated the mansion's facade, revealing boarded windows and ivy that clung to the walls. Like desperate hands, yet warm light flickered from within, and the faint aroma of roasted meat drifted on the wind, making his stomach clench with hunger. He hadn't eaten since morning, having spent the day driving through increasingly desolate countryside to reach this place. As he approached the front door, it swung open before he could knock. A woman emerged from the shadows, her pale face luminous in the darkness. She wore a flowing black dress that seemed to merge with the night itself, and her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders like spilled ink. In her delicate hands, she held an ornate candelabra, its flames dancing hypnotically. "Welcome," she said, her voice melodious, yet tinged with something he couldn't quite identify. "I am Evangeline. You must be Marcus." "How did you—" he began, but she raised a slender finger to her lips. "All will be explained. Please come inside. The storm grows fierce and dinner awaits." The interior was a study in Gothic elegance. Dust motes danced in the candlelight, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors watched from gilded frames. The dark air carried scents of aged wood, melting wax, and something else. Something metallic and unpleasant that made his nose wrinkle. "You sent the invitation?" Marcus asked, following her through corridors lined with faded tapestries. Evangeline glanced back, her dark eyes reflecting the candle flames. "In a manner of speaking, the house chooses its guests, and I merely facilitate the process." They entered a grand dining room where a long mahogany table was set for one. Crystal glasses caught the light, and silver cutlery gleamed against white china. At the head of the table sat a covered silver platter, steam escaping from beneath its dome. "Please sit," Evangeline said, gesturing to the single chair. "You must be famished after your journey." Marcus hesitated. The setup felt wrong, too formal, too intimate for a stranger's invitation. "Aren't you joining me?" Her smile was enigmatic. "I've already partaken. This meal is prepared specifically for you." As if in a trance, he found himself seated. Evangeline lifted the silver dome with ceremonial reverence, revealing a feast that made his mouth water. Perfectly roasted meat, golden potatoes, vegetables that gleamed with butter. It looked and smelled divine, yet something deep in his gut whispered warnings. "What kind of meat is this?" he asked, picking up his fork. "A family recipe," she replied, beginning to pace around the table like a predator circling prey. "Passed down through generations. Very exclusive." The first bite exploded with flavor, rich and savory beyond anything he'd ever tasted. Despite his growing unease, he found himself devouring the meal with desperate hunger. With each bite, Evangeline's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp in the candlelight. "Tell me," she said, her voice now carrying an otherworldly resonance. "Do you have family? Anyone who might come looking for you?" Marcus paused mid-chew, a chill racing down his spine. "Why would you ask that?" "Curiosity," she said, but her eyes glittered with predatory intent. "The house likes to know about its guests, their connections to the outside world." The meat suddenly tasted different, gamey, with an underlying flavor that made his stomach lurch. He pushed the plate away, but found his arms heavy, unresponsive. The room began to spin, and Evangeline's figure wavered like a mirage. "What did you do to me?" he slurred, trying to stand but falling back into the chair. "The same thing we do to all our guests," she said, her voice echoing as if coming from a great distance. "The house must feed, Marcus, and you are perfectly seasoned." The truth crashed over him like ice water. The metallic smell throughout the house, the way she'd avoided his questions about the meat, the single place setting. He wasn't a guest at dinner. He was dinner. Through his drugged haze, he saw the portraits on the walls differently now. The stern faces weren't ancestors. They were previous victims, their images captured before their final moments. And there, in an empty frame near the head of the table, he glimpsed his own reflection. The invitation said, "House of a Dine," he whispered, understanding flooding through him, but not dining. To dine, you dine on people. Evangeline's laughter was like breaking glass. Very good, Marcus, though your realization comes rather late. She moved closer, and he could see her true nature now. The way her fingers ended in razor-sharp claws, how her beautiful face shifted and writhed like a living mask. She wasn't human, perhaps she never had been. "Don't struggle," she cooed, caressing his face with surprising gentleness. "The drug will make everything peaceful. You'll simply drift away, and when you wake, you'll be part of the house's eternal feast." But Marcus had one advantage she hadn't counted on. His phone, still in his jacket pocket, its GPS tracking his location. As consciousness faded, he managed to activate its emergency beacon, sending his coordinates to the authorities. Hours later, as police sirens wailed in the distance, Evangeline stood at her window, watching the approaching lights with ancient, weary eyes. The house around her began to shimmer and fade, its supernatural foundations unable to withstand exposure to the modern world. "Until next time," she whispered to the storm, her form dissolving like smoke as the mansion crumbled into ruin. When the police arrived, they found only Marcus, unconscious but alive, lying in the ruins of a house that had burned down decades ago. In his pocket, they discovered an invitation that crumbled to ash at their touch, and in his bloodstream, traces of a paralytic agent that shouldn't have existed. Marcus recovered, but he never spoke of what happened that night. Sometimes, though, he would stare at empty lots as he drove past, wondering if other houses waited in the shadows, their hungry residents preparing invitations for the next unsuspecting guest. And sometimes, on stormy nights, he could swear he heard Evangeline's voice on the wind, whispering, "The house remembers, Marcus, and it's still hungry."